Well, thank you for the transition. Hopefully it was seamless. This is a panel discussion showcasing innovative technologies, and I think I can either read off your name in your bios, but I think you guys are much better at that than I am. So why don't we start with Marco? Marco is Chief Product Officer at Energy Vault, and so if you could please introduce yourself, your company, and provide an overview of your technology.
First of all, thank you for being here. It's an honor and also a pleasure to showcase new technology. Just a few minutes ago, you were mentioning energy storage, the importance of energy storage for the evolution and additional introduction of renewable energy within the country and in particular here in Kern County. So the company is a relatively young company. Energy Volta is a developer of a very innovative technology based on gravity-based storage. And recently we also have we have been working hard and also lucky to have a good investment from SoftBank Energy, $110 million, that is helping us to develop further the technology and help developers in Kern County and across the United States to develop renewable energy and in every form of energy that require energy storage. Within the company, I take care of the product, so I'm the responsible person for this kind of crazy solution. So if you have questions, please refer to me, and I'm very happy to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Noah?
Yeah, so Noah Verluen. I'm in charge of development and regulatory affairs for Global Clean Energy. And we really exist in sort of a hybrid place between agriculture and energy. We have a fairly robust upstream IP portfolio of plant-based feedstocks, which do not compete typically with food crops. And then we also straddle sort of a downstream project development component and focus where we integrate those feedstocks into facilities and essentially bridge those two ag energy gaps, which have existed for quite a while. And within the regulatory framework of California, there's a lot of advantages to having those connective pieces between the upstream feedstock and the downstream fuel production. So Global Clean Energy is basically a vertically integrated project development upstream company in the renewable fuel space.
Excellent. Geoffrey?
Yeah, hi. My name is Geoffrey Danker. I manage a policy and environmental strategy team at SoCal Gas. And so I started at the gas company about 5 or 6 years ago with the sole focus of decarbonizing the pipeline. And so we got several ways of doing that. Excited to talk to you guys today about renewable gas production in the state of California, and also some exciting technology development we have on the hydrogen side, which plays really well with the belly of the duck curve that we just heard about. So excited to be here. Thank you much.
Excellent. Marco, in 2019, your company won Fast Company's World Changing Idea Award. Congratulations on that. How well positioned is Kern County to continue to lead the nation in renewable energy development and primarily the deployment of innovative new technologies such as Energy Vault's system and technology?
Oh, yeah, I think that Kern County has been a leader in introducing new technology since the 70s, particularly in the field of renewable energy with wind and more recently with solar. So this is, in my opinion, an ideal ecosystem to introduce new technology, in particular in the field of storage, that are enabler for further development of a type of energy generation energy that has a low marginal cost. So yesterday at the very nice dinner that we had at Luigi, I was able to understand a little bit better about the ecosystem here and the kind of intersection between a traditional energy, fossil fuel, the oil industry and the gas industry, and the emerging part of the generation technology, so wind and solar. And I think that there is a good match between the two because it's a matter of expertise, local expertise, technology is something that cannot be stopped, so it's a matter of economics, and if new technology that makes more sense in the medium to long term, in the end they will have more space than older technology. But I strongly believe that people ultimately makes the difference. I'm referring to permitting process, the willingness to accept and support technology that they further can help the local economy. And therefore, I think that in particular, Energy Vault is very interested to develop a project in this part of the country. And we think that we can bring a significant value to the local economy and in general to the state of California that by 2045 want to be carbon free from the generation perspective. So happy to be here.
Yeah, this is actually for the panel. So if we could go down the line. By the way, the SoCal Gas Energy Summit toy wins a prize. I think we can all agree on that. Just love the cow. But what has been your experience in Kern County? Why Kern County? And how has Kern County been to work in? And that's to both you and Noah.
Yeah, I think Kern County is very well positioned to attack a number of these renewable technologies, and we've heard the tremendous progress on solar and wind and battery storage. Related to SoCal Gas's interest, I think we're going to see this next wave of renewable gas development happening. We could use some policy certainty, and so we have one regulation, SB 1383, that requires a 40% reduction in methane by 2030. We also have a corporate commitment on our side to incorporate up to 5% renewable gas by 2022 and 20% of our supply of renewable gas by 2030. So we have a utility corporate commitment, we have a methane reduction commitment, but there's a few other pieces that would help kind of mechanize how communities can start reducing methane emissions and incorporating more renewable gas into their gas system. We would love to see a renewable gas standard, and this was pushed forward by SB 1440 last year. It was kicked from legislature to CPUC, where this is similar to the renewable portfolio standard on the electric side, where the state made an aggressive commitment and put it on the investor-owned utilities to purchase this, where it was really expensive at first in 2007 and 2008, but the utilities had a mandate and they had to do it, and then we saw 10 years later, or 15 years later, the price reduction has been absolutely significant. We feel very strongly we would see that on the methane capture and renewable gas side if we had that policy certainty that the investor-owned utilities would be required to purchase X amount. So we think Kern County is well positioned for this because there's renewable gas sources within Kern County. You know, we're talking about any decomposition of organic matter. So wastewater treatment facilities, landfills, dairies. We're seeing more green bin food waste conversion technologies. And Kern County has all these resources, and they also have land uses such as industrial or land uses that have thermal applications that are exceedingly difficult to electrify. And so as you look at reducing carbon in certain industries, electrification makes a lot of sense for many of these industries, but there's also some that need to find low carbon resources that can produce thermal applications. And so we see a lot of potential in the county.
All right, Noah?
Absolutely. So our upstream business is fairly portable because it's agricultural based, and so it gives us a fair amount of flexibility to look at where we locate assets. And one of the things that Kern County offers and is really a unique kind of outlier as we've looked for existing facilities and opportunity facilities to integrate these upstream sort of renewable hydrocarbons into is where can we locate that has all of the necessary attributes that we need to be successful in those deployments. And so with liquid fuels, there's sort of a suite of things that you really need to identify, and they are not always co-located. In the case of Kern County, there's a lot of existing infrastructure which can be leveraged to deploy these projects very efficiently and access markets in California, which are essentially the most robust and reliable in the country. So we've got a significant amount of rail infrastructure. We have legacy oil and gas infrastructure and existing oil and gas infrastructure. There's the two primary industries in the valley being ag and energy. There's a lot of personnel expertise and personnel and workforce readiness, which is critical to being able to be successful. There's all of these other projects which create an ecosystem of renewable energy which can be brought into these developments to further reduce carbon intensity, which creates a lot of value in these liquid fuels under these highly regulated markets like LCFS and other emerging LCFS-style markets in the western United States and just the western side of North America more broadly. So you couple that with sort of a regulatory framework and agencies that are easy to deal with and relatively flexible and nimble, and it really gives sort of project developers like us with disaggregated pieces of the business ways to integrate those creatively with outside partners to do things ourselves into existing assets that can be done very efficiently without having to go do greenfield, brownfield type work. You can identify existing pieces of significant investment that you can leverage for creative solutions.
So can we all agree that Kern County is a great place to do business? Yes, thank you. We'll snake back. So, and then I think Marco has a video that he'd like to show of his technology. But can you give us just a sense of the level of investment and what your technology looks like and where it would be deployed within the county? So if you can just give a little background on that, because people, I don't know what a liquid fuels project looks like. So if you could just give a little background so that people can picture this and where it's deployed.
Liquid fuel? Yeah. So I don't know exactly the liquid fuel, but I know the gravity base, how it looks like. And so the concept is relatively intuitive because we wanted to use gravity as a way to store energy. The difficult part was to find out the right engineering and the right system control to make this economically viable. Because ultimately, lithium-ion is the dominant technology now, and lithium-ion was able to, let's say, open up the industry to the stationary energy storage. But there are still some issues from flammability of the technology, lithium-ion, and also the cost. And cost is really the big elephant in the room. So we put together the concept of using a basic component like a construction crane that is 500 feet tall and moving up and down large bricks, 35 tons each, building a tower, essentially. So you absorb energy when you pull all these bricks from the ground to the top of each of them. And you release energy when you pull back these bricks down to the ground. And the amount of energy that can be stored with the current design of the model is 35 megawatt hour. So we are talking about at a power of 5 megawatt, a duration of 7 hours. And this fit well an exercise, a use case that currently is kind of needed within the solar industry, and is the solar shifting, the energy shifting, moving energy later in the day, what Randy was referring before with the Danker. And so you have a modular solution that can be localized easily in different parts of the country. For example, here in the county, in the Kern County, you can have a multiple of these towers located with a solar project, or it can also support the grid at transmission level, providing ancillary service to the grid. So modular solution that is cost competitive and has a special way to build these bricks using debris and eventually material that can be recycled. And so here we enter also in another aspect that could be very interesting going forward, the concept of a circular economy and installing something in the ground that has a relatively long life, like 25, 30 years, so it doesn't require a lot of maintenance, and is not impacting negatively the environment. So it was an exercise essentially in the last couple of years going from the requirement, trying to develop a technology that has a positive element for the internal development and also the externalities.
Yeah, can we cue the video real quick? There's a quick 2-minute video outlining Energy Vault's technology, which is, if you haven't been on YouTube and looked at it, it's actually pretty impressive. So if we can cue the video.
Yeah, you know, apart from the music and
The soundtrack is available in the hall. But pretty impressive demonstration of your technology. But Geoffrey, would you like to talk about your technology a little bit?
Yeah, that's tough to follow. Can someone cue some dramatic music and I'll talk about. I got two technologies I want to highlight. One is the capture of methane through anaerobic digestion, which has tremendous potential in this area and is commercially available today. And you know, aside from the wastewater treatment in the landfills, which are a little more developed, the interesting potential here is when you start scaling these anaerobic digesters up, and when you're actually clustering several dairies together to put their waste into one digester to get that economies of scale. And we're also seeing that on the organic waste side. We have a new project in Paris, California, where several cities are putting their green bin waste into one digester, creating renewable gas, fueling their truck fleet, and then also injecting the excess into our pipeline. So we see a lot of potential for that. Another exciting technology I wanted to highlight that's more in the demonstration phase is a technology called power to gas. And this is a technology that we've seen very popular in Germany when they heavily incentivized renewable development, started getting that big mismatch between supply and demand during the middle of the day, also in the middle of the night for them because they had really big wind resources in the middle of the night. And so what power to gas does is it takes excess renewable electricity, runs through electrolysis, and splits water into its component parts. And so you have a hydrogen molecule and you have an oxygen molecule. Both have their own markets. Oxygen, hospitals love to buy pure oxygen, so that's a source for them. Hydrogen has all sorts of applications that are interesting. Hydrogen fuel cells, hydrogen transportation. We're looking at injecting hydrogen straight into our pipeline. I wish the engineers were a little more optimistic, but they're saying 5-6% we could blend without changing any of the end-use burners. We're also looking at carbon capture. So if you have that hydrogen molecule and you have a source of carbon, you can create synthetic methane, CH4, which also has the potential to reduce methane from or reduce the over-generation in one sector and the carbon in another sector. And the reason we see a lot of potential for hydrogen is because we've all invested in a pipeline system that has tremendous storage capability. And when I say it's tremendous, I mean long-term, large-scale, and it's something that we've all paid for through utility rates. I don't see it as our pipeline system. I see it as everyone's pipeline system, since we've all invested in it heavily. And so I think there's a lot of potential in the area where there's huge renewable developments going in to co-locate an electrolysis facility to produce hydrogen with the excess energy. Like I said, it's in demonstration phases. We have a few interesting projects, one with UC Irvine, where they're doing this on their microgrid on campus, and also with the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado, where we're also trying to hammer out some of the mechanics and what injecting hydrogen directly in our pipeline looks like. So those are two technologies that we're tremendously excited about.
Right, so on the technology side, when we think about technology in the liquid fuel space, we really are thinking about refinery type technology where you're taking kind of an organic agricultural feedstock that's relatively unrefined and putting it through a process to convert it into a drop-in or a blended liquid fuel substitute. So in Kern County, there's existing refinery assets that are doing this. There's also biodiesel production. So different technologies, but ultimately sort of a very similar end use, which is to displace or blend into kind of the existing mineral diesel supply chain. And so the technology is, on the conversion side, pretty mature. Historically, we've done work with some very large industrials where we took virgin plant oils, fractionated them, and converted them into jet fuel under DoD contracts where a significant portion of the DoD's tactical airframes were certified on renewable jet fuel. So the technology piece is not 5 years away. The technology is really there because it's quite similar to existing hydrotreater technology, which is used in every refinery around the world. And so the ability, though, to take that sort of lack of technology risk, scale it with an upstream feedstock, which is, again, sort of the ability to move that to a scalable footprint is important. Currently, primarily the feedstocks going into these fuels are soybean oil, canola oil. There's some waste products that also make their way into this market. But we've really focused on developing an IP portfolio that can sort of step in and fill a sort of future gap between the feedstock supply constraints of sort of tomorrow and the day after versus where we are today, where there is significant use of food grade products in that industry. And so if you project out the requirements of programs like the LCFS, it's really critical to look at other options for upstream feedstock generation that are really efficient and don't necessarily cannibalize other markets. And the technology sort of R&D process is one that is really critical. California's got a lot of smart people, and there's a lot of internal research and development work being done at UC Davis and other institutions that can be leveraged to really create the scalable upstream economy to bridge this liquid fuels gap that exists between regulatory sort of objectives and then sort of market dynamics. And so ultimately, Kern County fits in really nicely because of all the existing oil and gas infrastructure, pipelines, rail, human capital, like I mentioned. So there's just a lot of opportunity in the existing assets that are in the county to be able to accomplish these really aggressive and optimistic policy objectives.
Great. So this is the section. We have about 5 minutes left in the panel. This question is just an open question. And we'll start with Noah, go to Geoffrey, and then Marco. What's your wish list? If you could have any federal, state, or local policy change, if you could have a certain market signal, not 10 things, but 1 to 3 items, what would you wish for?
So there's a lot of existing regulatory uncertainty in the renewable fuels industry that is the result of mixed messages coming out of a number of different governmental bodies and organizations. So if there was stability, so unlike solar where there's a very defined ramp for what the investment tax credits look like and their step-down functions, in renewable fuels, there's not a cohesive policy framework that is reliable at the federal level. And so having that stability would be really critical. So I think the wish list would be have the federal programs as stable as the state programs here in California, have the tax credits sort of rationalized and put in place for a defined period of time which were reliable and finance parties could get behind and actually consider in their economic models. Because today, the instability in those programs really creates an environment where when you're talking to the finance guys in New York, they take these programs and discount them to essentially zero, and you still have to make the economics work. So stability on the policy side to a degree that allowed them to be included in sort of the economic case for these projects would be really critical and propel the industry in a meaningful way.
Yeah, I have 2 big ones. I talked a little bit about our methane reduction policy, SB 1383, which is fantastic. When Air Resources Board did their methane inventory, only about 10 or 15% of methane emissions in the state come from the oil and gas sector. The vast majority of it comes from, like I said, the decomposition of organic matter. So that gets into the 2 other things that we could use some policy certainty on. One is a renewable gas standard, just how we had on the electric side with the renewable portfolio standard, a commitment from the gas corporations in California to purchase a certain percentage of their product from renewable gas. And second, on the customer side, is an RNG tariff. And so we filed an application with the CPUC recently to allow customers an optional program that they can select to pay a little bit more to increase their renewable gas penetration into the product that they purchase. Right now, we have no mechanism to deliver renewable gas to customers that are increasingly asking us for it. And customers that, like I said, that have industrial processes or have thermal applications where they have these carbon neutrality goals and they say, look, we cannot electrify this use. It would completely change the use. And so they're coming to us that we want to purchase renewable gas, and so we can't do anything with CPUC without CPUC permission. And so those are our 2 policy priorities: is a renewable gas standard and an optional RNG tariff program.
Yeah, regarding energy storage, I think that currently there is some uncertainty in terms of regulatory framework to drive use cases. And we know how important it is to have clarity from the regulatory point of view to have consensus on what is the way to conduct business and streamline a use case. And I'm referring specifically to the policy that until now worked well, I think in California, resource adequacy, that defines 4 hours discharging duration for a power resources to be eligible to be paid. So essentially that is a product. At the same time, we have in other parts of the country different type of signals. In PJM, you need 10 hours. So if we look at what Kaiser is asking, the California Independent System Operator, and the message is we need storage for a deep shifting, energy shifting going forward, not just for frequency regulation, that ultimately we didn't need a new technology to provide frequency regulation. Combined cycle there, we are able to do that. So if regulators across the country are able to provide the right regulatory framework to transit from where we are today with an interpretation of the power park based on 3-4 hours duration to something that provide an incentive to add storage and manage smoothly the transition, that will definitely help.
All right, well, thank you. Well, that ends our panel. We very much appreciate your time. Thank you, Marco. Thank you, Geoffrey. And thank you, Noah, for providing some insight.
Thank you.